Hello, and welcome to Armenian Enough, a podcast about life and identity in the diaspora, with your host, Lara Vanian-Green.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Armenian Enough. Today's guest is an Iranian-Armenian LGBTQ+ educator and community leader. As the former director of education at One Archives Foundation, he aided in the implementation of LGBTQ+ history in K-12 schools in California and led statewide LGBTQ+ history trainings for teachers as well as educational programming for students. Currently, he serves as president of the board of directors at GALAS, the Gay and Lesbian Armenian Society.
Sorry to interrupt you. It's
Yes.
LGBTQ+ Armenian Society.
That's not what I'm just going to keep this part in because that is not, there are not enough letters for all of that. But sure, we'll do the whole thing.
Okay.
He has organized several programs geared towards providing services for LGBTQ+ Armenians in Los Angeles and beyond. And as the co-founder of Chara Gigi, possibly my favorite Armenian name for anything, it's a multimedia project by and for queer Armenians. He's engaged in creative direction, outreach, and co-execution of the final product. He is well-versed in the experiences of queer Armenians in Los Angeles, and I've invited him here to help shed some light on recent events. So please welcome to the show, Erik Adamian.
Hello.
Hi. I want to keep your correction in because I thought it was just so authentic. You need more letters and galas.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. It was a part of our making the organization, the logo, and the name be representative of the entire community. It was a much necessary and way overdue update that we made in 2021.
You honestly did? Like, that's a formal update. I didn't realize that.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yep.
Okay.
We met as a board. We decided on it. And as I said, it was long overdue. So it was not a difficult decision to make at all. By any means.
I'm told that all of your board decisions have to be unanimous. Is that correct?
Yes. Well, majority, but we tend to be pretty unanimous, to be honest with you. There's rarely ever any sort of like outlier opinion.
That's amazing. And that's difficult to do in an organization.
It's very difficult. Yeah. We are very lucky to have such a wonderful board of directors. And I've been lucky to be a part of many different iterations of the Gala Sport since 2016. And the current one that we have is really wonderful. And honestly, it's been through our joint efforts that we've been able to handle everything that's coming up right now.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we've always needed you. The Armenian community has always needed you, even before you guys existed. But I think right now, given all the current, the political environment currently, I think you're more important than ever. And you guys have a unique voice, as hopefully, this podcast does too, occupies a little bit of that space, the intersection of Armenian and queer, which is a beautiful and terrifying sometimes place to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But let's take a step back a little bit. And why don't you tell us about sort of your background and the role that Armenian and Iranian culture played in your upbringing?
So I was born and raised in Iran. My family and I immigrated to the United States in 2008 when I was 14 years old. So I went to high school in Glendale, actually. And
like Glendale or Hoover?
Hoover.
Okay.
Well, in the city of Glendale, yes. I went to Hoover High.
Yeah. Just have to check its local rivalry. I went to Glendale, but go ahead.
Oh, you did?
I did.
I don't know if we can do this anymore. Sorry.
And done. No, please. Like I've ever cared.
I know. So, yeah, I grew up in Glendale and then moved to different parts of LA County. And I went to Glendale Community College. I have a degree in English literature and civic engagement from UCLA. I graduated in 2016. So while I was in my undergraduate years at UCLA, I decided to do my senior thesis on the experiences of LGBTQ plus Armenians in Los Angeles. And this was really my reintroduction to the Armenian community and Armenian culture and existing as a part of the Armenian community. Perhaps I should talk a little bit more about what my previous background in the Armenian community was.
I have so many questions. Right?
I know. So, I grew up in a family that was very engaged in Armenian culture, I would say.
Okay.
We didn't necessarily have any political affiliations with the different Armenian groups and organizations and whatnot, but my parents, my grandparents, and all of my relatives very much so engaged in Armenian poetry, literature, music, dance, and the folklore, essentially, of Armenianness. And growing up in Iran, it was especially important for us to be engaged with the Armenian culture. It was really a lifeline for me when I was a kid. I was very fond of it. I did many poetry recitations. I would compete in different music performance recitals and whatnot. And I obviously carried that with me when we came to the United States. And I would say that by the time that I was kind of discovering my queerness in my teenage years and my late teenage years, eventually I stumbled upon the fact that, and I say fact, but I'm going to put an asterisk in that fact, but this was my reality at the time as a teenager, who was coming to terms with his identities. I realized that there is no space for me in the Armenian community. I kind of started to question all of it. I kind of started to question, okay, well, I think I'm gay. And this realization, by the way, did not come to me until I graduated from high school, that I didn't essentially label myself or put a name to the identity or everything that I was until I graduated from high school, which was, mind you, a very toxic environment.
So I have a few questions here. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but so oftentimes when it's a sort of, I'll term that a late discovery, like you didn't discover it along with your, puberty. It seemed to come in your late teens. So oftentimes other people sort of seem aware of that before you. Was that the case for you?
Oh, thank you for that question, because I think I should clarify. I always knew that I'm attracted to, at the time when I was a teenager, I was attracted to other boys, Okay. So that was never a matter of questioning, I knew that. I knew where that was. But in terms of the identity of gay, as in if you are a man and you are attracted to other men, there's a name for it. There's an identity for it. You're not alone. You're gay. That sort of a construct, which can arguably be said that the identity itself is a Western construct, right? That didn't really click for me when I was in high school. So it was always, for me, the case was that, okay, yes, you're attracted to other men, or at the time, I guess, other boys. And this means nothing. Like, you're still going to get married. You're still going to have children.
Oh, wow.
With a woman and all of that. Yeah. And this was very much so a product of the environment that I was raised in. Of course, that goes without saying. Being a part of an immigrant family and then coming to America and being a part of, again, continuing to be a part of the Armenian community here and being in high school. I mean, I didn't see any sort of representation of, if you do identify as a gay person, you're still fine and you can do whatever it is that you want to do with your life and live a happy and fulfilling life, whatever that means to you. So it was always kind of this side thing for me. I never put a name to it, an identity to it.
Okay, that helps explain it a little bit more. I would have never guessed that you thought, okay, I'm attracted to boys, but obviously I'm still gonna fulfill my duties and marry a woman and have children.
Oh yeah, and that being attracted came about from from a very young age.
Okay,
So
so
yeah.
you didn't, yeah. So in your late teens, you realize like, that's probably not going to happen. Where I don't see myself settling down with a woman and creating a family like that.
Yeah, I mean, I dated the girls when I was in high school.
Hmm. So
So,
do a lot of gay guys,
you
and
know,
vice versa. Yeah.
I know, and all very lovely people, and it didn't, yeah, it didn't work out. And honestly, aside from the Armenian culture part of it, I was also raised in a spiritual slash religious ish household. I mean, there were pretty strict religious beliefs, but I had a relationship with God and I had a relationship with Christianity. And I mean, in Iran, in schools, I went to an Armenian school. So we learned about Christianity. We learned about Jesus's life and all of it. I held those religious beliefs very dear to me as well.
Mm.
But by the time that I was graduating from high school and I kind of was in this limbo space of being the world being my oyster essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not in K through 12 anymore, and I get to choose what I want to do with my life from this moment forward. I found myself free from the constructs of what everybody else tells me to do, and I had a very private journey of coming out to myself. And this happened right after high school, when I had already dated girls. I had tried to simulate, if you will, the heteronormative life,
Sure.
and it did not work at all by any means. And I was also exposed to a lot of Western media at this point, and American media specifically. And this was around the time that a lot of positive representations of LGBTQ folks were starting to appear in mainstream media. There were TV shows.
Erik, the media clearly made you gay. Clearly.
Yes. I mean, and
I'm
thanks to
sorry.
media for that.
I'm sorry. We're being facetious, but it
Yes.
just made me laugh because you brought it up, and then so many people really think that a book or a movie or a TV show has that kind of power.
Oh God.
But I'm getting ahead of myself. Yeah.
I'm sure we're gonna talk about this, but all that media did to me was everything that everybody else had failed to do throughout the rest of my life up until that point. If I had learned about the existence of gay people, about queer people, and that they can just go on and live a good life, I would not have gone through everything that I went through as a teenager when I was in high school, because up until that point, up until I saw positive representations of like, okay, this is fine. Your existence is valid. That's what it felt at the time. Up until I saw that, all I knew was that gay people are deviants, they're diseased, and we don't talk about them because it's not even a part of things that we need to consider as Armenians, basically as Armenians. And I'll just leave it at that.
That is the baggage that is left behind from the late 70s, all throughout the 80s and early 90s, from AIDS, homophobia, and those things all being conflated together. Oh God, that's just awful. But I think how it just surprises me that you came to the United States at 14 and didn't see Will and Grace on TV or something, because there were shows at that time.
I know. I didn't, and I mean, nobody around me watched them either.
Well,
and
sure.
and that's the reality.
Your mom and dad didn't watch Will and Grace as soon as they came to
They did not. I mean, I wish they did, but and I had to do a lot of self-discovery of what is a TV show that I want to watch, for example. And then it just so happened that some characters in these TV shows were queer. And I was like, oh, wait, let's see how this unfolds. And then it turns out it was fine. Granted, I will say that at the time it was also very white representations of people, of queer people. But still, sometimes for a very closeted kid whose queer identity was not acknowledged in my Iranian Armenian immigrant family, even that white representation of a queer person felt like an aspiration in a way. It felt like a blueprint of, oh, okay, this person can live like this. Why can't I? You know?
Were you living at home at this time?
I was. Yes, I was living at home. Mm-hmm.
So how does this process of self-discovery take place? Over what period of time? And how do you completely keep it to yourself?
For me, the process of self-discovery, I mean, I can just speak from my personal experience. So I knew that I'm attracted to other boys, and I knew that I was actively trying to channel that attraction to girls. When that didn't work out, I had a very defining moment, actually, of having a conversation essentially between myself and God. Religion was a very big part of kind of how I viewed the world at the time, right? So it was this moment of, hey, I'm being completely honest here. I tried dating girls, wonderful people. It did not work out. I'm not hiding anything from you, God. And I'm just being myself, and you're supposed to love me as I am. So here we are. You know, the page turned for me in that moment. And that process of self-discovery, I feel like it had happened up until that point. And then once I accepted myself, it felt like a whole new world opened to me, you know?
So you came out to God first. That's awesome.
Kind of, yes, I did. I did, and it's very interesting. I've been talking a lot about my experience lately, just with different folks, and I did not realize how big of a part religion and just Christianity and my faith played into my coming out journey. And honestly, that was the ultimate battle, if you will, for my internal process of coming out to myself. I had to have God be okay with me.
Yeah. And was God okay with you?
I mean, I hope so. I don't care.
You haven't gotten any complaints.
Haven't gotten any complaints. At this point, I don't care. But at the time, God was fine. Yeah. It turns out that the next day I woke up still identifying as gay, and life was just fine.
Yeah. I mean, for those people who are religious, it turns out God probably already knew, right? Like
Exactly. Exactly. And that's actually a wonderful thing to say, because it felt like my sense of identity as gay felt like something that went beyond my religious beliefs, beyond my cultural affiliations, beyond everything. And I think that's at the core of what identifying as a queer person is. It's not like a fashion trend that you pick up, or it's not something that you see in a textbook and you're like, all right, maybe I'll try this out today. You know, I know that it's a core part of our existence, and people just have different ways of accessing it and getting to it, and different times of their lives that play a different role in how they access it and get to it. But it's by no means this sort of a, quote unquote lifestyle that some people say it is. It's not
clearly
that.
not a lifestyle, not a choice. What was it like when I'm assuming at some point you came out to your parents or your family? What was that like?
Yeah, so that's when things got complicated. It was not, okay, so speaking of white representations of being queer, the coming out story was represented in a very linear way of, you identify as queer, then you go to your parents and you have this like big anxiety inducing conversation about like, I'm gay.
Over Thanksgiving dinner.
Exactly. Over Thanksgiving dinner. And people either just say, we knew and we love you, or they kick you out of the house.
But yes,
Turns
absolutely.
out that doesn't apply to everyone, especially queer immigrant folks and
Right.
people of color. To be completely candid with you, there hasn't been a single conversation of coming out with my parents. I like to think of it as a lifelong experience that everybody goes through. And for me, it's definitely been a step-by-step experience of coming out. And it's been a part of the process. First, you drop hints of like, hey, I'm actually volunteering for like the largest LGBTQ Armenian organization that there is out there. And then you kind of say, I don't know, oh, here's my friend who is a guy and who I hang out with all the time. Connect the dots, It's kind of that sort of a thing.
Okay.
But for me specifically, it's been some things happened in my early 20s that my parents essentially found out about it. And I've been very lucky and blessed that my parents, despite all of the uncomfortable conversations and things that I probably did not want to hear as an emerging queer person newly out of the closet, despite all of those conversations and the difficult moments, my parents took it upon themselves to kind of educate themselves, to work it out, to kind of be like, oh, okay, well, I love my child. So what if he's gay? And this was a decade-long, I will even say, process. So in my early 20s, that experience happened with my parents, and then we did not talk about it at all. And I felt like that if I want to explore my queerness, I have to move out of my house. I have to go somewhere else. So I applied to UCLA. I got in. And even though UCLA was like a 30-minute drive away from my parents' house, I moved out and I went there. I removed myself from the community, from my family, from my relatives and everybody. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to introduce myself to all of my UCLA friends as, hi, I'm Erik and I'm gay,
Yeah.
So that was kind of the process of me disconnecting from my family, from my culture. In fact, I remember it was kind of very dramatic and poetic in many ways. The night before I moved into my dorm at UCLA, I was invited to do a poetry recitation at an event at the Iranahai Muchun in Glendale. And I did that, and I distinctly remember this is my last hurrah. I'm not doing anything Armenian related whatsoever from this point on. I'm going to go be gay now. So then I went to UCLA and then I, of course, started to explore my sexuality, and I started to explore who am I as a gay person. And it turns out that the cultural emptiness that I felt in me could not be remedied by even the most exuberant amount of gay that I put myself into. You know what I mean?
Well, I totally get that, and I think most queer Armenians would get that, because they are two distinct identities that overlap, right? They intersect, but they are very, very different. And in many ways at odds with one another. Their values are at odds with one another at the very least. Mm-hmm. I think what you said is so crucial about having to, and I recommend it for all late teenagers in their early 20s, please move out of your parents' house. Please find a way to make that happen.
I know. If you're able to and you can, it's the best gift that you can give yourself.
Yes. Then this is like regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, like just figure out who you are without your parents breathing down your neck. Just take that space. It's so, so crucial. I had to, because I was living in Glendale, and I was living with my mom after high school, and like the first couple of years of, the first year of community college. Mm-hmm, I also went to Glendale Community College. And I was like, I need to get out of Glendale, because every time I turn around is another Armenian person and another opinion I don't want. Mm-hmm. So I went to college in San Francisco, and oh my God, it was so freeing. It was, I mean, just not to live with my mom was freeing. No offense. I love my dearly departed mother, but I was tired of other people telling me who I was and what I thought, and I needed that space to do it on my own. And, my mom knew that I came out as bi when I was 17, even though I knew a couple years earlier. And she was like, it's fine, but just, keep that under wraps. Like, don't let Armenian people see you. And I was in Queer Nation, and we were going to protests, and I was actively involved in the queer community and had to worry about when we went on actions to not be photographed by the photographer or the news camera or, which now I just feel like, damn it, I was there and I'm not in that photo. Like 30 plus years later. I wish I wouldn't have listened, but I was trying really hard to be respectful of her wishes. And I thought in order to be free and not hurt her in that way or not defy, the things that she's asked for, I needed to move away and figure out who I was. And it was the healthiest thing for me that I could do. But I completely, and I have to say from the time that I was 15 and I realized that I was also attracted to women, I knew, first of all, that was a terrifying thought in 1988. Yeah. It was a really scary thought. And I knew that I didn't know for sure how my parents would respond, but I knew that there was no place for me in the Armenian community. And I started putting distance between myself and the community because I knew I wasn't going to be accepted.
Right.
So I didn't really feel or allow myself to feel the loss of an Armenian community because I figured like, I'm going to reject them first. You're going to reject me? No, I reject you. There. So I went and I lived my life. And it wasn't until, I was about to have a child that I really thought about, let's go back and see what elements of my culture as a grandchild of a genocide survivor, what do I want to pass on to my daughter? And that was the whole coming back into the Armenian sphere. And, a few years after that, this podcast was born because there are so many things that I think are beautiful about the Armenian culture and community and experience and so enriching, but it comes in a package with so many things that I think are hurtful and dishonest and hypocritical and closed-minded. And I mean, the podcast started from a desire to try and provide a different platform. I dare say, like, change elements of the Armenian community because I don't want her to have to make the same decision, right? So if she grows up and she is fill in the blank, whatever it is that is not accepted by the community currently, I don't want that to be the case for her, which it probably will be because this type of thing takes generations of work. But anyway, I'm going to step off my little soapbox.
No, thank you for sharing that. There's so much universality in all of our personal experiences. And I feel like the more that we talk about it, the less alone the future generations will feel, because we've gone through what we've gone through and we are still going through it, to be honest with you. But there's no reason that folks who come after us and the kids that are in school right now have to suffer.
Honestly, that's who this podcast is for. The kids now and future generations.
Absolutely.
So I know we've talked about a lot, but we also have so much more that we need to cover. But I don't want to leave your thought unfinished because I did interrupt you. You were saying no amount of like queer joy was filling in the space of what you missed being a part of the Armenian culture.
Yeah. And I guess this brings us full circle back to what I started with, which was my thesis project at UCLA. So the 2 years that I was there, the 2 to 3 years that I was there, I was just not engaging with anything having to do with Armenians. I was not a part of the Armenian Student Association on campus because I already knew how I was going to be treated. Now, whether that was judgmental, presumptuous, it was a safe assumption. you know? So until through a set of events that I'm not going to get into right now, I was...
Oh, I'm imagining the worst. Sorry, go ahead.
Through a set of events, I just I had to pick a topic for my senior thesis that I did. So I did two projects. One of them had to do with my English degree, and that was on Oscar Wilde, who was a big part of my coming out process and just kind of understanding my queerness. And then the second one, I could pick any topic that I wanted to. So I picked, let's see what this being queer and Armenian is about. I'm curious. So I approached it from a place of curiosity and in kind of a scientific way, honestly. Not scientific, that's not the right word. A clinical way.
Okay.
So I was embarking onto this journey in terms of, I want to find out what's out there. I know it's not for me, but I still want to know what's out there. So I literally Googled gay Armenians in Los Angeles, and there it was, Gallus's website. And I'm like, oh my God, this exists. It's an organization. And of course, Gallus was founded in 1998, but I did not know anything about Gallus up until 2015, which is when I did this. So I kind of tried to make connections with Gallus, and it did not happen. And then again, by some serendipitous event, I found out that one of the student clubs that I was a part of at UCLA was going to have a guest speaker from Gallus. And I'm like, oh my God, it exists. It's alive. So the person came. He was a previous board member of Gallus, and he talked about what Gallus is, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, I approached him after the presentation and I said, I want to come to your next event. And he said, okay, the Thanksgiving event is coming up in a few weeks. And now it's called Friendsgiving, but at the time it was Thanksgiving. I got my group of friends together and we went to Gallus, and we went to the Gallus event, and it was a magical moment, to say the least. It was kind of like the door was opened, and one of the previous Gallus board members and also one of the founding members of Gallus opened up the door, and it was almost like my brain could not compute. I was like, okay, you're a queer Armenian person, and pretty much everybody else in this house is a queer Armenian person, and we're all going to have Armenian food and listen to Armenian music, and it's all fine. Okay. So, and the rest is history. I mean, I went to the board at the time, and I said I want to be involved. And of course, I was also looking for people to participate in my senior thesis project. So I got to make a couple of really great connections with some people that I met at the party, and I got to interview them in depth. And
can I make a quick observation of something really superficial but funny? I think.
Please tell me. Yes.
So we were talking about that coming out dinner that happens over Thanksgiving. And this was he went to the Gallus thing at Thanksgiving, and it was kind of like you're coming out into both worlds simultaneously.
Oh, totally. Yes.
If you were writing a novel, this would be a beautiful arc.
Thank you for pointing that out. I haven't thought about that, but that's actually, yeah, it's a queer Armenian reclaiming of the coming out at Thanksgiving narrative.
Yes.
So
there's a movie in there somewhere.
I hope so. So, and then this was my reintroduction and kind of reclaiming and starting to love the Armenian parts of me and the love that I have for the Armenian culture and for our traditions and for our communities, but in a wholesome and in a holistic way, if you will. It felt like all of me is welcome in these spaces, whereas if I were to just go to a random Armenian event somewhere else, it wouldn't be. So,
can I be really honest with you?
Yeah.
Just with everything that is going on right now, and I think maybe we should just jump into what's going on with this, but
sure.
With disproportionate number of Armenians who are fighting the school board for recognizing Pride Month, which has happened year after year already. But somehow this year they've been motivated to come out against this as, I think, part of a much larger national agenda. But putting a pin in that for the moment, so many Armenians have been on the wrong side of this issue, on the hate-filled and fearful side of this issue, that it has actually, I have felt re-traumatized. And it was weird for me to even acknowledge that because I didn't realize that I was traumatized in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, I left you guys because I knew that you guys were not going to accept me. So I, gave a polite middle finger and went on with my life. And that was that. And I didn't realize that took its toll on me. And I think that became very clear when all this stuff started happening and we saw horrible, violent and intimidating behaviors on, video clips and in the media and on social media. And I felt like I knew it. You guys were never safe. Like as a group, you guys were never going to support me. It's a feeling that I've been fighting, that it's actually making me feel bad about my Armenianness. I had not planned on saying any of this, by the way, but it is true for what's happening to me. Like everything inside me wants to say F you again. And you guys never did anything for me before. And, big deal. I can live the rest of my life without you.
Mm-hmm.
What keeps me here in the Armenian Enough space are the tons of messages I've gotten from queer and closeted Armenians and allies saying thank you. Thank you for providing the space. Thank you for being visible, for saying the stuff that I can't say. So it's making me reconsider my role and thinking okay, even my presence or just occupying this space matters. So I'm just going to stay right here. But I'm having a really hard time internally feeling good about my Armenianness. I think I'll just put it that way. I don't know if you have any insights, Doc, but but I lay this at your feet because this has been such a difficult time for me. And you seem to be much more engaged with the Armenian part of yourself. How do you walk that tightrope? Just let's talk about everything that's going on right now. I know I said a bunch of stuff and you can take it in any direction you want, but how are you dealing with this?
Yeah. No, that's, first of all, thank you for sharing that with me. I know it's very vulnerable to kind of admit to all of that because what you're feeling is, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but I will say it's probably something that a lot of queer Armenians feel right now. And
right.
Myself included to a certain degree, it's not, I would say that for me, it's not so much about feeling good or bad about my Armenianness. It's more so about I'm standing my ground. I know that my Armenianness and my love for the Armenian culture and my contributions to the Armenian community is not going to be erased, and it cannot remain ignored because a bunch of people decide to be on the wrong side of history and create a sense of limited and close-minded idea of what being an Armenian person is. So I'm kind of standing my ground, and I've had to do personally a lot of putting my personal emotions on the back burner and going to copious amounts of therapy and kind of and I'm lucky to have access to that. But I think that a part of, what, I'll just share this with you too, and this is a vulnerable thing for me to share as well. Being so visible in the queer Armenian spaces, of course, throughout the years, I've gotten the comments, even if it's just online comments of, who are you? What are you doing? Disgusting, etc., right? And people can call me all sorts of names that they want. What they say does not define who I am. But I will say that the one comment that hurts me to my core is when people say, well, you're not Armenian. That's not an Armenian person. An Armenian wouldn't do this. And this was a bit surprising to me when it showed up this month as well, because people were calling the queer activists and our supporters all sorts of names, all sorts of horrible things, untrue and horrible things. And out of all of them, this one was what stood out to me when I came across it a couple of weeks ago. I tend to have my fighter head on when I'm in these situations. I tend to kind of ask and do and advocate as much as I possibly can, and really sticking to any morsel of hope that I may have left in me to be able to handle all of it.
Oh, yeah.
It is really disheartening to see the comments from, let's call it the opposition, if you will. It's really disheartening to see them. Of course, it affects me. Even when I say, okay, well, you're full of shit, it still affects me. But I counter it with joy and love from the Gallus community, from my closest friends, most of whom are a part of the Gallus community. I kind of, just like how Armenian Enough was a way for you. You said that folks who've come to me, who have come to you and have said, thank you for doing this. Thank you for speaking out about it. We have a lot of those people in our Gallus communities as well. And it is Gallus that serves as the one big component of my life that reconciles my relationship with being Armenian. If I cannot be a part of the Armenian community while also being my queer self, I don't want to be a part of the Armenian community or any community at this point. So that space that Gallus has created is really what has connected me to being an Armenian person again. And it's only through community with LGBTQ Armenians that I've multiplied to infinity my love for the Armenian culture, my engagement with the Armenian culture. I mean, as the Armenian community, we've been going through a lot just generally over the past couple of years, of course, with the Artsakh blockade and the war that started in 2020. And with our community of LGBTQ plus Armenians, we've stuck together. We've advocated from inside the closet, mind you, because we haven't felt safe to externally show up as queer Armenian people to the big rallies that support Artsakh, to the big, Armenian events and demonstrations. We've been holding community, and we've been standing in solidarity with each other and with the larger Armenian community. And that is very powerful to me, because if the Gallus community wasn't here, if LGBTQ Armenians did not exist together and did not actively engage with each other, I personally probably would not have engaged in the Armenian community. And let's face it, and in a place like America, I could go very easily live in West Hollywood, kiss my Armenian identity goodbye, and just go on with my life. And a very dear person to me recently told me, they said, oh, why are you putting yourself through this? You could go just live elsewhere and just be completely fine. And I'm like, well, that's debatable if I'll be completely fine, considering that nationally there are attacks on LGBTQ people. True. But you're right. I could just not engage and go live a safe and quote unquote happy life. But I don't want to. Why should I do that? Being Armenian is a huge part of me. I don't feel any sort of like duty to give back to my culture. It's not about that at all. I genuinely love our culture. I love everything that has made up being Armenian throughout the last few millennia, if you will. So
I personally find your point of view inspirational. You really do have a lot of genuine love, and I will try to reflect more on on what you've said here and see if I can adopt parts of that for me too and my thinking too. But I wanted to thank you so much for bringing up that comment, because it is something that is worthy of discussion. The comment that somebody left, and certainly it's been said to me too, "You're not Armenian." Okay. No, I mean, yes, of course, it's like the cornerstone of the show. Like, nobody gets to tell you who you are. Nobody can bequeath your Armenianhood, and nobody can take it away. So that, and from that point of view, it's a big shoulder shrug to me. It didn't strike me as particularly painful. However, it does strike me as particularly meaningful, because as an Armenian woman, as an Armenian mother, I claim my rightful place at the right hand of God, right? It's like mother and God at the top of the hierarchy.
Right.
I have always felt comfortable arguing, whether online or in person or whatever, with another Armenian. I've always been able to say whatever I wanted without fear of, sure, somebody can yell and scream and call me names, but I never thought that I would be in any physical danger arguing with an Armenian man. Right? As an Armenian woman first, and as a mother. I mean, come on. What kind of a monster would attack a mother?
Right.
But what that phrase, "you're not Armenian," really means, when you unpack it, is you're not worthy of the respect and the safety, of the protection that we would normally afford an Armenian woman, an Armenian mother. Therefore, you are the enemy. Therefore, whatever we do to you, we're not doing to an Armenian. Right?
Right.
I can assault you. I can threaten you. I can follow you to your car and smash in your windshield, which has happened to friends of mine at the recent rallies. We're not safe. And I've never in my entire life, I mean, I'm used to quiet disapproval. I'm used to vocal disapproval, but I've never had to fear for my physical safety in a group of Armenian men. And I do now.
Right.
And that is a huge shift for me and for all of us, because the first step in abusive behavior is to other the person, right? So we're no longer Armenians, we're other. Therefore, anything goes. You're not Armenian, you're queer.
We don't have your back anymore. Yeah. Oh my God.
And
today?
Sorry, not today. Recently.
Oh gosh. Okay.
You're not. He said a whole bunch
it any better, but that's...
no, it doesn't make it any better. It wasn't today. That somehow just slipped out of my mouth. But then I'm like arguing with him online, and then somebody from Queer Nation pulls me aside and is like, "You don't know who you're arguing with. Like, you need to block that dude. He's got gang affiliations and he's dangerous." And I was like, "Holy shit, really? Okay."
Oh, yeah.
I thought I was just arguing with a fellow Armenian, but now I feel like their policy, and by they I do mean a minority. Well, I don't know how minority it is, but a portion of the opposition is very violent and is not above using intimidation and violence as fear tactics to intimidate and subdue the LGBTQ and allies who support what the school board is doing. So I think at this point we've talked so much about the school board without actually mentioning it. Would you do me the favor and summarize just a little bit of what's happening right now in LA and Glendale in particular?
So LGBTQ plus inclusion in schools around the country have been under attack. They've been growing gradually over the last couple of years. And locally for us in Los Angeles and Glendale Unified, they kind of started accelerating last year, actually. And this year they've gone to an all-time high, if you will.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah. So the core of what is happening is, simply put, an attack on LGBTQ plus individuals. And I want to be very clear on that attacking inclusive school environments is an attack on LGBTQ plus individuals. in North Hollywood at Satakoy Elementary, there was a book at a second grade level that was taught, and it included a sentence that said, and I'm paraphrasing, but it said something to the effect of, some families have two mommies and two daddies. And that is what really triggered a lot of what happened at Satakoy Elementary. Now, of course, aside from that, there were efforts to protest the Pride celebration or the Pride Assembly that happened at Satakoy Elementary on June 2nd. And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of different schools from LAUSD and Glendale Unified and surrounding districts were also planning Pride celebrations on June 2nd. So parents of the students at these different schools started protesting the inclusion of such a book that says two mommies and daddies and the celebration of Pride in schools under the message of this is indoctrinating our children and it's age inappropriate, and leave discussions like this to the parents.
Right.
I want to be clear on not talking about this as just a bunch of angry parents in the streets, because that's not what's happening. As I said, it's a part of a series of organized attacks on schools and districts across the country. We are seeing it happen in the state of California, not only in LAUSD, not only in Glendale Unified, but also in places like Chino Hills, Temecula, and many other places. So there is the presence of outside agitators at most, if not all, of these attacks that are happening. There are what you call Proud Boys present at all of these different protests that happen. And it's very clear that whoever is doing these attacks is not only targeting LGBTQ plus folks, but there are outside agendas. There are personal political agendas for getting elected, for, our government and our elected officials becoming more and more right-wing conservative, which will then presumably, this is just my personal observation, presumably it will lead to the national presidential election, and it provides a good kind of ground for that to happen, for the next president to be a right-wing conservative.
100%. And when all of this started, I just had a heartsick feeling. And I turned to my husband and I said, this is going to get way worse until next year's election, because they don't have an agenda to run on. They don't have a platform if you eliminate hate and fear and misinformation, like gross misinformation. They got nothing. So if we serve as the boogeyman, if we serve as that person that they can all unite against, then they can fundraise. Then they have something that people care about, that the religious institutions care about. So I totally agree with you on that. And it was so clear when people show up at what seems like an impromptu protest, and they're all wearing the same T-shirts and shouting the same slogans.
Oh, yeah.
There's money behind it. I mean, I've been in grassroots organizing for a long time.
Yep.
I'm pretty confident that a group of Armenians didn't get together and make this their issue. Also, can I just say, this is the first time in my 50 years, holy crap, that I have seen Armenians on the front line of an issue that has nothing to do with Armenia. Nothing. Right. This is like a historic moment, and not one that I'm proud of or anyone should be proud of, where Armenians are taking an interest in something that has zero to do with the Armenian community.
Right.
I just have to say this, even though I know when I'm talking to you, I'm definitely preaching to the choir, but indoctrination. First of all, most of us grew up with the mom and dad. Let's just start the indoctrination right there. And then every Disney movie, and then every movie ever, every book ever. You think one freaking sentence in a child's book is going to blow their world open? How ridiculous. We all have and suffer from heterosexual indoctrination.
From a very young age, from when
conception,
we know ourselves.
Literally from conception.
Exactly. And what is it? How do you qualify that talking about same-sex relationships or queerness or being trans? How do you qualify that as indoctrination when we're hammered with information about boys do this, girls do this? And at a very young age, I know a lot of people in my family, at least I'll speak from personal experience, at like 3 or 4 years old, oh, you think that girl is cute? Or you want to marry her? Or you want to do this? And that's not indoctrination?
Erik, how do we do gender reveal parties?
Well,
right?
Exactly. Right.
Which, I mean, everything is either pink or blue. Everything is pink or blue.
Right. So
you're born into the binary and you have to find your way out if that's who you are.
Right. And these outside agitators have picked up on the fact, I mean, they're doing it with a lot of different POC and immigrant communities, right? And they've picked up on the things that certain communities hold really valuable. And then they start, putting together an angle of this is what is being attacked in your community. Do you stand for this?
Yeah, your Armenian Christian values.
Exactly. And how would you feel if your kids grow up and they don't want to serve as baby making machines, if they don't want to continue your community, if you will, and reproduce, et cetera. And I'm only saying that not because queer people don't have kids or anything of the sort, but I'm saying that because given the conservative values that exist in all different communities, when you amplify a certain part of it and ingrain a sense of fear in the survival of your community and culture into the members of that community, then that becomes an issue for the community to address. Does that make sense?
That was perfectly stated. And it helps me understand on a certain level, the level of passion, anger, because they must feel like their very survival is at stake and those flames are being fanned, but that's not what's happening at all.
It's not what's happening. And it's very, I mean, personally, as a person who's involved and who was involved, and I hope to be involved again with the implementation of the Fair Education Act and LGBTQ inclusive curriculum, I'm familiar with the content that is being taught in schools, the content that's included in each grade level. And let me tell you, experts from the state of California have gotten together over many, many, many years to put together a history and social science framework that is age appropriate for each grade level. There's a breakdown of all of the different topics that can be taught in different grade levels on LGBTQ history and inclusion, et cetera, et cetera. On a second grade level, it's about talking about diverse families, for example. On a fifth grade level, it's about, I don't have the standards in front of me right now, but if I remember correctly, for example, it's about California Gold Rush and what was the community of men like at the time. And then when you get to like 8th grade and 11th grade, etc., that's when we get into the LGBTQ plus civil rights movement and how it aligned with other movements that were going on at the time, and how did LGBTQ activism kind of start to accelerate in the middle of the 20th century. So I had somebody ask me recently when we were talking about all of this, they said, well, what is the content that's being taught in each grade level? And I was kind of reviewing all of these different grade levels with this person with a presentation that I pulled from my times at One Archives Foundation. And they said, so do parents know about all of these topics and they're just picking on this one? I'm like, no. And this person was a parent themselves. And I was like, you as a parent, did you ever sit there and review the history and social science curriculum that your kid was learning? And, people don't have a clue about what kids learn in schools. And why is it that this topic is specifically what triggers your sense of parental protection and your sense of kind of like, I need to step in because my child's education needs to be about math and spelling and sciences. That's what the school's purpose is. And I find that really incredibly infuriating because as a teenager, I'll just speak from my personal experience. I went to school every single day, as most teenagers do, and most kids do. And I spent a lot of my time at school, aka interacting with teachers, interacting with the curriculum, with textbooks, with my friends, with the different clubs at school, and all of that. Kids live in schools for the majority of their days for the first 18 years of their lives, basically. How is a school only supposed to be about math and sciences and ignore the entire person that's going to that school? Because guess what? The maths and the sciences and the spellings and all of the grammar that you learn in school and everything else that you learn in school means nothing if you're constantly on the verge of, I don't want to go to a really dark place, but considering really terrible things for yourself as a queer person who feels extremely lonely at that age in school. And then you come home and then your family is also not talking about it. And there's literally no space other than the mazes in your brain to process, oh, who am I? Oh, I'm a boy and I like other boys. But all I'm seeing and hearing from my family, from schools, from everywhere is that man and woman get married and reproduce and have children, et cetera, et cetera. So where am I supposed to process all of that if I don't see any representations of people like me in textbooks, in classrooms, in different things that teachers say? Then how does that support me into flourishing, into becoming a healthy and well-rounded adult?
Let me take it just a step further, because you do actually learn about gay people, whether it's in science or English or history, but their sexuality is hidden. It's erased from whatever the teachers teach you, right? I'm sure you must have studied some Oscar Wilde poem in high school, or a book, or some, the importance of being earnest or something must have come across you, but they don't discuss his sexuality. And there are so many people we could go through the history books and cherry pick, who is bisexual, who is, there's a lot about Lincoln, just saying, a lot of love letters to other men and a lot of evidence. And these things are swept under the rug, and we are just taught the cold, dry facts, which is on one level fine, but on another level, very consciously erasing that person's identity. Yeah. And when you can't see yourself in someone in society anywhere, you start to feel alone, you start to feel crazy, you start to feel like something's really wrong with you. So it's so important to include everyone. I didn't realize my whole life until I went to see a movie several years ago in the theater that was in Armenian. And I didn't have to read the English subtitles. I was like, oh, is this how it feels to have something in your native language that, you're on the inside of the group. Finally, you're on the inside, not on the outside looking in.
Yes.
It's just a tremendous benefit. And let's be, we are creating with this curricula a more well-rounded citizen. And for sure, if you're living in the state of California, this is what you need to be able to. You're not functional as a citizen here if you don't know this history, whether it's Black history, whether it's Indigenous history, whether it's queer history. It all comes together, right? It's all the fabric of the United States. I feel like somebody should be waving a flag behind me, but it's really important. And it's not. I don't understand, and it pisses me off why the people who are opposed to these things, A, don't know what's in it, B, sexualize everything. I've heard people say they're showing pornography to children, as though that would ever happen, straight or gay.
Oh my God. Yeah.
The level of misinformation is comical if it weren't so sad, or would be comical if it weren't so sad. They're using terms like grooming and pedophilia, which is like, I'm sure you probably didn't want to use those words, and I don't like even saying them, but those are old tropes for fear tactics, right? They're dog whistles.
Yeah.
And you know that you hear that, and it immediately someone goes into like a red alert state of rage and doesn't stop to consider the reality of what's happening. These are terms that have been used against our community. They're not original at all. Like from its inception, when the vast majority of pedophiles are straight white men, right?
Right.
And clergy. I mean,
yeah.
Are we supposed to shy away from saying what we all know? The last time I heard of a drag queen molesting a child was never. Never.
Right.
Like, I defy you to bring me a case. So there's a lot of hate and fear and misinformation. And it's really difficult to argue this because the arguing requires more than 5 words.
And it requires two sides that are thinking about a topic in a different way, but still rationally and logically. This is why arguments, with the people who are carrying all of these hateful sentiments is essentially useless. There's no argument to be made when you're going to throw God and family values and whatever it is that you're throwing at me as a blanket statement. Your values do not define my existence. And guess what? My existence is real and your values may not be. You know what I mean?
Your values are arbitrary. My existence is real.
What's that?
I said your values are arbitrary. My existence is real.
Yeah.
It's difficult to argue. This is what I always tell people on our side of things, that they're like, well, what's a great, slogan or sign or something that we can have to counteract what they're saying? And I'm always like, is it more than 4 or 5 words? Because if it's going to be more than make America great again, they don't have the attention span for that. There's no bandwidth to process nuance or a genuine explanation of something. Their questions are not honest because they don't really want the answer. They don't really want to know what the curriculum is. They have no interest. They want to say, don't teach your kids it's okay to be gay.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell them, don't tell John if he feels like he's a girl that's okay. Don't do that. Don't affirm our children. That's what, That's what they're really saying. Don't affirm our children.
And how scary is it that LGBTQ plus inclusion in schools has always been very clear about the fact that this is not about the safety and well-being of LGBTQ plus kids only. It's about an overall healthy school climate. It's about not raising a generation of bullies, a generation of bigots. It's about whether you are LGBTQ or not, you need to understand, respect, and celebrate the fact that there are people with different lived experiences, with different identities, and it's okay.
I'll include this one story. So I was having a conversation recently with my dad who, for a man close to 80 who was born in Syria and moved to the United States in his 20s, he's actually very liberal for who he is and how he grew up. But, obviously not as liberal as his daughter who was born and raised here.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking about Drag Queen Story Hour, which I love. And he was telling me like, don't take your daughter to these things. And I said, are you kidding? Samantha and I have been going to Drag Queen Story Hour since she was 4 years old. And he was like, no, Laura, I don't agree with this. See, that's the stuff that I don't like. And I said, what is it that you don't like? And he said the sexualizing of children. And I was like, literally, there is nothing sexual about a guy in a beautiful dress and gorgeous makeup reading a children's book to children. Like it's so wholesome. It's not even funny. I don't understand. And he couldn't see my point of view, and I don't see his, because literally having gone to many story hours with and without my child, like it's so sweet. It's so affirming.
It is
wholesome. Like, that is really the word that comes to mind. It is wholesome.
I mean, do people have a problem with clowns? Are clowns sexualizing? Like,
exactly.
You know what I mean?
They're
Drag queens are
terrifying.
essentially, I mean, yes, they're terrifying, but you know what I mean? Drag queens are essentially an oversized version of life, right? They're kind of like these dolls. They're cartoons. They're like they're clowns, literally. And people who are very affirming have approached me and said, "Erik, is this true? Are the drag queens doing lewd dances to the kids in schools?" And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? It's a clown that's sitting in front of you with a lot of makeup on and a lot of funny and beautiful and gorgeous and outside of this world outfits and presents, and telling your kids, like reading stories that you would read to your kids. But it's probably much more entertaining coming from a drag queen than you, to be honest with you.
It's so entertaining. We did it all throughout COVID, and it was awesome.
Right. So it's just certain things also, I think, come into play into this. It's also the inherent sexualization of the woman, of the female existence. Also, I think that plays a lot of
Say more, because I'm not clear on what that means.
I think that drag queens, for example, they show up in like feminine outfits, right?
Oh,
if they're drag queens. So it's just to that effect. It's like if you think about it, how many times do we hear in our families and in our community, "Oh, a good girl is not supposed to dress like that. Why do you look like a hooker?" or whatever it is that people say. Even though drag queens are not inherently sexual by any means, and they're just there to entertain and to provide it, since we're talking in the context of schools, to provide age-appropriate content to students. Yes. And they're being vetted through the school officials and administrators and whatnot before they come on campus and do their performance.
Right. It's all context.
When they still come there, exactly. Yeah. When they still come there, these people are reducing drag queens, for example, to a sexually liberated woman doing pole dancing in schools.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Got it.
And that's
it's just really far from the truth.
That's another episode that we can talk about this.
Okay, so my memory is really bad. I'm just going to blame it on my age now, but I have been wanting to share this story on a podcast, and I don't think I have yet. I might have, and if I have, I'm sorry. It's a cool story anyway. So I connect to my Armenianness the most. Like, my big, soft and fuzzy Armenian emotions are connected to my grandfather, who's a genocide survivor. Mm-hmm. And I was like his favorite grandkid because he had amazing taste. No offense to my cousins. Like, he loved me. So my mom, who grew up in Argentina, still Armenian descent, but grew up in Argentina, always had like gay friends and drag queens and all that kind of stuff. So when she came here, she continued that trend. And my mom loved a good drag show. And there used to be this little club in North Hollywood called the Queen Mary. And they did the different lip syncing, whether it was like Bette Midler or Donna Summer, like whatever, like the drag performers would dress up and lip sync. And in between, the MC would have banter with whoever was there. And there was like a 2-drink minimum and stuff. So as soon as I could go, I think probably I might have still been under drinking age, that is, definitely over 18. But we would go, she loved celebrating her birthdays there. So we would go with my grandfather, who was in his 90s, Armenian genocide survivor. Don't come at me. He loved watching the drag reviews, and they were on him like bees on honey. They saw like a rotund old man, and he was like the butt of half of their jokes, and they would come and they would like snuggle up to him, and my grandfather would be giggling and his face would turn red like a little boy. He just loved it. He thought it was funny. He knew they were men dressed up as women, but he still obviously like thought they were very attractive. And he sat there and he enjoyed the spectacle for what it was. He was not offended. He wasn't like, oh, these gay men dressed as women. And like, no, the dude, just 90-year-old Armenian genocide survivor, just enjoyed the drag show.
Mm-hmm.
That's the family I grew up. That's the danger that he saw, and like, it's a big nothing.
It's a big nothing. Exactly.
And so like, that's who I think about. Like, my grandpa is my link to Armenianness. Mm-hmm. My grandpa, cool with drag shows, right? Like, nothing you say is stronger than that for me.
Right.
You don't get more Armenian, if there's the scale, than having survived the genocide. So shut up.
Right.
That's my take on it.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
That's such a sweet story.
I know. I wish I had a photo of him. I have a photo of my mom with the drag queens, but I don't have a photo of my grandpa. I would be posting that like all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've gone really long and I apologize, but I think it was very worth it. But I don't want to end without asking you, what are some things that Armenians who are queer and out and or allies can do to help the situation right now, if anything?
So with queer Armenians right now, it's most important, first of all, to take care of yourself. There's a lot of hatred. There's a lot of anti-LGBTQ sentiments that are floating and being blasted in the air right now. So I would say for queer Armenians, it's an absolute priority for us to take care of ourselves in these times and come to Gallus as a source of support and as a source of safety and community. I will say that for our allies, it's more important now than ever to speak up. If you are an ally, if you are texting me, calling me, emailing me with your supportive words, the effect of your words would multiply into infinity if you were to vocally support us, whether it's through public statements, whether it's through social media, however you can. Gallus really serves as the hub of creating this progressive movement forward with our community. We are advocating for an expansive and an inclusive future for all Armenians, whether you're queer or not queer. Support the organization. We do a lot of critical work, especially in the education space, mental health space, and it goes without saying that in the arts and culture space, we create a place for Armenians to not only get the resources that they need, but also to celebrate our existence. And as we know, instances for that are very scarce right now in the world. So whether it's through monetary donation or your time volunteering for the organization, if you have connections to anybody within the larger Armenian community, allied communities, and people in positions of power, it's important to take the proactive step of approaching the organization and letting your support known, and for us to be able to rely on you to help us through the process. Now, I want to kind of differentiate between Armenian allies and non-Armenian allies who could be members of the LGBTQ community who are not a part of the Armenian LGBTQ community. In this past month, our group of organizers from Gallus and from our few allied organizations, we've been on the front lines. We've been asking for support. We've been asking for vocal and public show of support for everything that we do, and we've received close to zero responses from people. This goes to LGBTQ folks who are not Armenian as well. Now is a time that if we are fragmented, if we do not help and support and lift each other up, if we do not stand united, the consequences of what we will be facing in the next couple of years, and who knows until when. But honestly, with the national landscape and the political landscape, it doesn't look too good right now. The consequences of lack of support, lack of unity will be devastating for everybody. as we're seeing right now on a national landscape and a local landscape, our rights are under attack. LGBTQ people are being stripped off of their basic civil rights. The Human Rights Campaign a couple of weeks ago declared a state of emergency for LGBTQ plus Americans. And what I want to say is that this is by no means only an issue that is affecting LGBTQ plus Armenians, although currently within our local landscape, we are the most vulnerable community of people that there are. However, this is potentially going to have a ripple effect in the larger LGBTQ communities if it hasn't already. It is very important to be united, to lift each other up, to give a platform to the voices of LGBTQ plus Armenians, at least in a local way, because there are so many dangerous narratives that are being put out there about Armenians and about LGBTQ people. So you can only imagine what LGBTQ plus Armenians are going through right now. The narrative of Armenian versus LGBTQ is a monolith. It's false. There are LGBTQ plus Armenians, and we are the undoing of everything that's being said on a local level. And what I mean by that is that our lived experiences as LGBTQ plus Armenians is a testament to how false, not even misguided, just flat out wrong, every argument that is being made out there from members of the Armenian community is about the lack of queer people in the Armenian community. So
they're still saying that? They were saying that 30 years ago.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh, thank God there are no gay Armenians.
There are no gay Armenians, exactly. Right. So it's very dangerous, and the community is very divided right now. So we need support. You know, a couple of us are really carrying the work forward, but we need as much support as we possibly can get in order to sustainably move forward. And that shows up as support to Gallus, to uplifting queer stories and voices, queer Armenian stories and voices, and to really be intentional. We are way past the thoughts and prayers stage of anything. That doesn't do anything for anybody. You need to show up with your active and vocal allyship, or else all of this is going to lead to a very devastating place, not only for LGBTQ plus Armenians, but for non-LGBTQ plus Armenians and for allied LGBTQ non-Armenian communities.
Yeah, once this ball starts rolling of fear and hatred of the other, we all know, historically speaking, where that leads. And this is just the beginning. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, we have to lift the mood a little bit, Erik. Thank you for everything, but shake it off. Oh, take a moment, yes. Deep breaths, and out. Okay. Time for our 5 fun questions.
Let's do it.
This is going to be the hardest question ever. No. What is your favorite Armenian food?
Oh, kebab.
Oh, that was too easy. I feel like you studied.
I mean, there's literally, I don't even have to think about it. So,
do you understand both Western and Eastern Armenian?
No.
You don't understand Western?
I don't. I try, and I have very dear friends who speak only Western Armenian, but I do I can kind of understand what they're saying, but it's difficult for me. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Number 3. What is the most Armenian thing about you?
Oh my gosh. The most Armenian thing about me is that I drink a cup of surge before I open my eyes in the morning.
Oh, be Armenian or regular?
Yeah.
Armenian just coffee.
Surge, huh? Yeah, wow. Armenian coffee.
All right. I like it.
Yeah.
Number 4 is, who is your favorite Armenian celebrity?
Who's my favorite Armenian celebrity? I want to give a thoughtful answer to this. Let me see. My favorite Armenian celebrity is Lili Tovanissian. And if I could switch lives with her for one day, I would first of all raid her closet. And then I would I would publish a statement of support for LGBTQ Armenians.
Oh, I like that answer. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question. You drink coffee in the mornings, Armenian coffee, but do you know how to read Armenian coffee cups?
No, I don't know how to read, but my it's because my mom does it for me. So
you never picked up selfish? You never picked up the coffee cup and read it for her?
I mean, I've probably tried, but it's very interesting when my mom reads my coffee cup or anybody else reads my coffee cup, because they just see things that I'm like, okay, I'm not able to see that. But then they point it out to me and I'm like, oh, wow. I think it's a different level of, witchcraft that you need to be in tune with to be able to read the coffee cups.
Is your mom good? Should I come over for coffee?
Oh, absolutely. Let me call her right now.
I can read your cup too, because I love doing that. But will you please, tomorrow morning or whenever the next time you have a cup, turn it over and snap a few pictures for us for our Instagram?
Okay, I'll do that.
Awesome.
There's gonna be a pride flag in it. Just so
yay! Oh, thank you so much for coming here to talk about this. I know you're super busy and overwhelmed, but I really appreciate you, especially since you're so knowledgeable about what's happening right now in both communities. I really, really appreciate you coming here to talk about it.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor to be a part of the amazing tapestry of folks that you've featured in Armenian Enough, and thank you to you as well for giving us the platform, for creating quite literally the platform for queer Armenians to speak about their life experiences and in such a intimate and connected way. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. You can find out more about upcoming Gallus events at Gallus_LA on Instagram or at www.gallusla.org. As always, the links are going to be in the show notes for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. And remember, until next time, that you are always more than enough.